Welcome to Faith Talk with Val
and Sony.
We are a Bible-based podcast where we talk about real life, real struggles, and how faith makes all the difference. So in today's episode, it's going to be a continuation of something that we started last week, which is on healing. But this episode is about what happens after healing, because healing is just the beginning of the story. It actually then introduces another concept, responsibility.
Yes. So today we're going to discuss the responsibility healing brings and the cost of looking back. So with that, a really good example of this is the story of Lot's wife. And I'm just going to read you a quick verse. And it is found in Genesis 19:26. And it reads, "But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt." So she experienced immediate consequences. Because she looked back. So a little bit of context.
Yes,
let me go back
you can't just leave us there, Sony.
So let me tell you what led to this immediate consequence. At this time, there was a city called Sodom and Gomorrah. And in this city, there was sin going on. And mind you, this took place after the story of Noah's Ark, where like God had already cleansed the world and like start over, reset. But here goes humanity again, messing it up and committing sin left and right. And so Abraham is one of God's chosen people, right? And so before he sends his angels out to Sodom and Gomorrah, God's visiting with Abraham and he's like, this is what's about to happen. Abraham has a nephew. He knows he's a good man. He knows his family are good people. He pleads with God, hey, you're going to destroy the whole city, but what if there's good people there that don't deserve to be destroyed? And God said, well, if there are good people there, they will be spared. After that conversation with Abraham, the two angels head over to Sodom and Gomorrah. They warn Lot and his family. If there is anyone here that belongs to you and your family, warn them and get out of this city because destruction is about to fall upon them. Lot goes to warn his sons-in-law, but they think he's joking. His sons-in-law to be, that is. But they think he's joking. So they pay him no mind. So the angels are like, you have to go now. We can't do anything until you guys are out of here. Through their hesitation, like they're leaving everything they've ever known behind, the angels finally grab their hands, Lot, his wife, and the two daughters, and lead them out of the city.
So it was a forceful.
It was almost like God had to literally pull them out of the city because they wouldn't let go. So I'll come back to that in a second. So they make it out of the city, and before they went on, the angels specifically instructed them, do not look back. Go on, do not look back. As the morning came, there's like sulfur and like just fire all over the city, so the city was destroyed. And all of a sudden, Lot's wife turns back.
No.
She was just instructed to keep going and not look back, but she looked back. And this makes me think of so many like parallels on how this applies to life, right?
Yeah.
Like you're in a bad situation. You're surrounded by nothing but sin around you. And God is like, this is not the place where my child belongs. Let me remove you. Let me send you to a better place. And still we don't let go. And still we hold on tight and we look back.
In a way, I feel like it was a mercy that God had on Lot's family, because God could have easily just said, like, I told you once, I told you twice, you're not going. This is the extent. But that's not what happened. Like the angel said, like they physically ushered them out.
Yeah. I heard this the other day and it's so funny. It's like, God, why did it have to be so hard? Like, why did I have to lose all of that? Or why did it have to be so painful going through all of that? And then like, this was a reel I saw. And she's like, because sometimes, my child, you don't listen to gentle parenting. I was like, oh.
What?
Oh. That makes so much sense. They literally had to pull his family and him out of there because they were so bonded to what they were used to.
And something that's like really cool about this whole scenario is that you could think, oh, we're making a lot of assumptions about why it's not okay to look back. Like, why is it so impactful that Lot's wife looked back? Well, first off, it's impactful because she turned into salt. So that was a clear consequence. So it's definitely something that you want to look at. If God tells you not to do something and there's like an immediate consequence, in this case, death, it means it's serious.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think it teaches us how in Matthew 6:24, it says, no man can serve two masters. God's saying he doesn't take it lightly when he calls you to do something and you still keep reminiscing on what could have been from something that he took you out of.
Yeah.
We can see this. This is actually really important because in the New Testament, when Jesus is speaking, he actually references this very story, and he references Lot's wife. And it can be found in Luke 17, verse 32, where it says, remember Lot's wife. Jesus uses her as a warning about divided loyalty when God is moving you forward.
So don't be like her and look back. Don't have a divided heart, and just trust that God's goodness and his plans for your future is always better
than what you left.
Yeah. So all that to say, looking back wasn't nostalgia, it was disobedience.
That's actually kind of perfect, because then in Joshua 24:15, it says, choose this day whom you will serve. The same pattern we see over and over again in the Bible. People being physically removed from bad situations, but emotionally and spiritually still bonded to them.
Yeah.
I think God is very clear. Healing requires choosing to move forward, even if backward feels more familiar.
They were human. They made mistakes.
Which brings us to the second aspect that we're going to talk about, which is ignoring red flags.
And it's your responsibility to guard your heart, so you can't ignore red flags. There's a verse that when I read it, it was super impactful, and it made me think of what happens after God pulls you out of a tough situation, out of a rough relationship. So you're out of this, and now you're in this space where the wound is so fresh that it's almost like, let me go back to what I know. But then you're looking forward and you're like, okay, but I do see where God is taking me. But you're conflicted. You're also feeling so many emotions, and sometimes you don't go in any direction. Sometimes you don't look back, but you also don't move forward.
You're paralyzed.
And so this verse came to mind when I started thinking about the whole process of that, right? So this is Psalm 73, 21-23. And it says, when my heart was embittered, I was torn up inside. I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. And this made me think about how through the pain, through the chaos, God is still with us. And all we have to do is pause and listen so that we're not ignoring the red flags, and we can hear when God is saying, this is not what I had for you. So with that, we want to go into the story of Hosea, because when you consider relationships, it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the definition of looking back. And so Val's going to start us off.
So Hosea basically tells the story of a prophet God asks to marry a woman named Gomer, knowing she won't stay faithful. Their marriage becomes this living picture of Israel's relationship with God, which is loved, chosen, and cared for, yet constantly running to other things. Gomer eventually leaves Hosea and ends up stuck in the very life God was pulling her out of. And instead of giving up, God tells Hosea to go and find her, to pay the price to redeem her and bring her home. And that moment becomes the heart of the whole book. Israel has wandered, they've broken trust, and they've chased lesser loves, but God keeps pursuing them anyways. This story is specifically about Israel, but it also exposes something true about all of us, how we easily drift and how steady God's love is when he brings us back. And just to be clear, Hosea isn't a model for staying in harmful or abusive relationships. I know in the past, I've heard a lot of Hosea quoted for these kind of things. And we just want to be clear, like Hosea's marriage was a prophetic assignment, not a pattern for us to imitate. The story is about God's covenant with Israel, not permission for anyone to tolerate mistreatment.
I think that's very important. And the reason why I was saying that there is not a one size fits all when it comes to the definition of looking back is because it really depends on the foundation of the relationship and covenant. And I think there is a beauty in having that protection of covenant and having God in the relationship, even after mistakes, even after, we fumble in situations. And this subject had Val and I going back and forth because although we have similar opinions about it, I do think that there are different angles to consider when you're talking about this. And we'll share a few examples of what we mean by that when I say like covenant, for instance, right? So one of the stories that I want to share is, this is from my church in the previous state. Over Christmas, he was talking about the blessings that we have and valuing the blessings that we have, right? He goes on to say that, but like his first marriage. So young, married to this woman who commits infidelity, and he was trying to work on the relationship and then finds out like, no, she's like ready to marry this man, like leave him to marry this man. And so he's distraught. And then he's explaining about like that first Christmas where everybody is, with their families and everybody's, doing their thing and he's alone. And it's not that he wasn't invited to places, but I do think that when you're in that situation, like you don't want to be with other people and their families. You want to be with yours. There's a moment of pause that you take, like how did I get here? How is this my life right now? And in that moment, like it could have been a moment of destruction. And so at the time he lived in Vegas, and he said, the only thing that's open Christmas Day are the casinos, and I needed a meal. And so he goes there and he saw all of those people who were alone, all of those people who also had nowhere else to go. And like when you think about it that way, like it hurts your heart. Like that's sad. And when he was explaining, it was just more of like a reminder of what he had just lost. Like, this is where I'm at. Like, he wasn't there to gamble, but he's like, this is literally where I had to come and eat. Fast forward, he's a pastor of an amazing church now. He's been married for decades. He has wonderful children, wonderful grandchildren now. And let me reiterate, he does not advocate for divorce. He was basically forced into that divorce. But the beauty that came from trusting God and like the blessing that came from letting go and not looking back to what he'd lost. Because he would have sat and fought for her. He loved her, and that's who he had made covenant with. And so when he's thinking about what allowing himself to let go opened the door to, he lived a great life. He has peace now. He has a wonderful wife. He has wonderful children and grandchildren. And that door eventually led him to move to California. And now he's leading this great, amazing church. And he's an amazing pastor. And like him being vulnerable and sharing that, it has to be brave and hard. It's not something easy to talk about, especially because people have so many opinions about divorce. But I just think that there is beauty in letting go when you trust God and you can see the wonderful things that God has ahead for you. And so there's that perspective, right? But then there's also the perspective that Val's going to share with us.
Yes. So I really love that perspective because it's redemption after divorce. And I also believe that there's redemption while staying in the relationship. Not saying that one is better than the other. I'm like, they're different.
Yeah.
They're different for many reasons. And I think when it comes to relationships, they're so personal and intimate. It's much like your relationship with God, that you're like, there's certain things that I don't know how to explain to other people, but it makes sense to me and God. I think that's how relationships are. Like, there's certain things, just the same way, like, no one can judge you for having children or not having children. You're like, that's me and my spouse's personal choice. I think divorce kind of falls into that same category. I don't think people should judge what you and your spouse or ex-spouse decide to do within your marriage, because
that's between the two of you and God. And only the two of you and God.
Yes. I have a little bit of a different story on that. When I was younger, like high school, my parents, I was telling Sonia, like, I don't know how to explain this. There's something about like sharing a really impactful story that you're a part of, but also honoring the people that are a part of that story. That's really, really hard. And I want to make sure I say this in a way that like still honors them, but it doesn't take away from my own experience of like the perspective that I had as being a child in a marriage that was about to divorce. And the ugliness that happens, the discord that happens, that sometimes you think it's only between your husband and your wife, but when you have children, it spills. And I'm telling you, as a child of that situation, it does spill, and you get a lot of this spillage. In my parents' relationship, there's a lot of things that happened, like he said, she said. I'm not going to go into it. My parents ended up separating for about like 9 months, and it was really, really awful during that time. And I think me and my siblings, they can talk about it. Like, they have their own experiences. We're all pretty close in age. But some of the things that I kind of want to go over are things like, when that happened, my parents were so hurt on both ends. They didn't really have time to ever consider their children's needs within the relationship. I remember my sister crying a lot. I remember my brother crying a lot. I don't think I ever cried, but I was the oldest, so it's like a different dynamic. Like, I had to keep it together for them. Yeah. I think older siblings kind of understand, like, you have to be strong. You have to be the strong one for them, especially when you don't see your parents being strong for you guys. All to say, my parents are together now. Their marriage is stronger, better than it was before. I do feel like that was a learning lesson for them and their relationship with God, and it's super beautiful. But the one part that I want to kind of like share is one night in particular, my sister was crying, and I was like talking to God, and I was like, God, I am so sad that you can do stuff like cure cancer. You can raise people up from the dead. You can do all these miraculous things. And that makes me so sad that you can't bring my mom back to our house, bring my parents back together, because so many things have been said from both sides of the family. And they're like nasty things where families are against each other. And it's not like it happened yesterday and maybe we can salvage it. I'm like, months have passed. Yeah. So these wounds have been infected and they've closed, but they are not healed. They're just like,
it's ugly.
It's ugly. And so much time has passed. I don't think that you can undo all the things that were said. Like, once things are said, it's like bad blood. I was like, I can't unhear all the things I heard. I can't unexperience all the things that I experienced. And it makes me so sad that I will never have the family that I once had. And I wasn't challenging God when I said this. It was just like a legit feeling. It was just me expressing sadness for the extent of what I thought I could see God do. And
it was expressing your faithfulness, actually. Like
really,
your faith was so strong that you believed God could change the situation.
Like, I think I was just, I don't know, but like within a month of me doing that prayer, I don't know how it happened. I don't even remember how it developed, but my parents got back together. And when they got back together, it was as if almost nothing had happened before. Like, and then when they got back together, they decided to have another kid, and that's where my little brother comes in. So we ended up forming like a different new family.
Yeah.
And that was really, really beautiful, because I cannot picture, like, I remember that I said, I don't think you can make it how it was before. And that was absolutely right. He didn't make it how it was before. He made it better. I do want to make a little note here. Both my parents were equally yoked. And I think that is important to note, because it is very hard to work on a common goal with someone when you're not at the same foundation, when you don't believe the same things, when you don't value the same things, when God is not in the relationship to hold you accountable. Parts of me feel like that was only possible because God was in that relationship to hold both of them accountable.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, I feel like it's just going to make it a little tougher.
And I want to add to that there is a difference when it comes to being equally yoked, because I feel like a lot of times Christians think like, oh, you're a Christian, I'm Christian, we're equally yoked, we can pursue this. But no, there is a difference between the woman who goes to church and a woman of God, or vice versa. Like, oh, that's a man who goes to church, or no, that's a man of God. There is a difference. The reason I'm saying that is going back to like the story that I shared. One person, so the pastor, like, he was a man of God. The other person was a woman who went to church. Did she have the foundation? I don't know her, so I can't actually say this as factual, but just like for the sake of example, was the foundation there? And being equally yoked matters. And this is a little bit of insight to what we'll talk about next week, knowing the fruit. And we'll explain and go further into being equally yoked when choosing a partner.
Something that I wanted to point out, we're not saying divorce is right, or if it's off the table, not off the table. I think a lot of times we could get stuck in like, what's the right choice? And I feel like that's the wrong question. The right question is, I'm going to take it back to God, because whatever I process with God, whatever I pray about, whatever He reveals about the situation, that will be the right choice.
Yeah.
And that is very personal. That is very
between you and God and that person.
Yes.
And the reason we're pointing that out is because a lot of times you let voices who do care about you, who do love you, who maybe saw the pain you went through, and it's valid. They care about you, and it's worth taking a listen. But at the end of the day, you want to talk to God about those decisions and understand that restoration can mean a lot of things. God restores, but sometimes that restoration isn't the relationship. It's restoring your self-worth. It's restoring your discernment. It's the future He's building that now you can sustain from that healing and not looking back. Or for some of you, it's restoring the foundation that fell apart in that marriage and allowing you a second chance and allowing you to reflect and forgive and move forward, or reflect and repent. I guess it depends on which side you're on.
No, I really love that. And I think it goes back to like how personal God is with each and every one of us. And a really neat example of this is usually when I talk to people about, or they're like asking me about like divorce for some reason, or like infidelity, I'm usually like, that's a very personal issue. Like, you want to make sure you're not valuing anyone's opinion too much beside like what you want to do and what God's calling you to do, and you need to pray about it. And the reason I say this is because when you pray about things, God will specifically speak to you through people that he appoints to go to you. And I'll explain this. This is a really cool story. So I just kind of shared my parents' non-divorce story and the restoration of their marriage. So anyone that comes up to me, I'm like, all I can offer you is my testimony. I'm like, take it to God. But if God brought you specifically to me, my testimony is of my parents' marriage being redeemed. I can't offer you a divorce story because I don't have it. But you came to me. So and you were telling me that like you were praying for God to send you someone. So a really neat thing is, I don't know if I've mentioned in the podcast, I did something called like the world race. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So I was a missionary and this is important background. So I was a missionary for like 11 months and I traveled to 11 different countries and we just spread the gospel. So here am I from the United States going over to Ecuador, and I am only in Ecuador for a month because we're only a month in every country. And I remember at the end of every journey when we were there, we would do something called debriefs where we would stay at like somewhere that can house a lot of people because we were traveling with like a group of 40 plus-ish people. And we were doing like that debrief and it was like kind of like a party setting. I wasn't feeling it. So I left the party and I went over to like the lobby of the place that was there. And I was like working on my computer. I was like doing something. And there was these two ladies in that lobby and they were like talking. I heard like bits and pieces, something about like the wife was like distraught because of infidelity and like cheating and all these things. And, granted, she was speaking in Spanish. I speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. We're in Ecuador, but I'm just like still minding my own business. And then she literally turns around and looks at me, and then she starts speaking to me. If she would have picked any other person on my team, they all spoke English except this one other guy. She spoke to me, and I happened to understand her. Turns out she was thinking about divorcing her husband. She was from the United States. She had come to visit family in Ecuador and she was just there for a couple days. And she was like praying to God, God, give me a sign. Like, I don't know what to do. She was desperate. So she's like, I'm just going to go visit my family and like clear my mind and see what I'm going to do about this whole situation. Because when I go back, I have to give him an answer if I want to leave him or if I want to like work through the marriage and all these things. And she basically turned around in that moment and she's like, what do you think? And I'm just like,
the fact that she's sharing all of this with a stranger, right?
Exactly. I'm just like, well, I only heard like bits and pieces of your story. And she's like, well, let me explain. And she like just dumps her story. Yes. And I'm just like, whoa. And then she's like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, and I've been praying to God for a sign. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool because I'm like a missionary. I'm coming here with a whole bunch
I know God.
I was like, but I can't tell you whether or not you should leave your husband. I'm not going to give you a definitive yes or a definitive no. I think that's a very personal issue, but I could share my testimony, like the testimony that I have. And the only testimony I have is my parents on the brink of divorce decided to reconcile and redeem that relationship. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but I'm saying you've been waiting for an answer. You literally told me you've been asking God to bring someone to you. You relocated countries to go do this. I'm over here by chance. I'm not even supposed to be here. And all I can give you is take it back to God and let me share a little bit about my testimony with my parents' redemption story of staying within the marriage. So I kind of like share the story and like how God was able to redeem it beautifully. And then she's like crying this entire time. And I'm like, I don't know, is that like resonating, not resonating? I'm confused. But she was just like, thank you, thank you. I never asked her if she was going to leave her husband or not leave him, because I honestly don't think that was my business. It wasn't my business to know. That was part of her journey. I'm like, all I'm here is to give you a story.
Yeah.
You were asking God for something. I trust that God is going to lead you in the correct direction. All to say, it's not a one size fits all. I think when you take things to God, He will bring people to you and share what they have to offer.
But it reminds me of the episode we did on where I told you about, I prayed about something and then the song and then you had a dream, and like all of it was like back-to-back confirmation.
Yes.
And that just takes me back to, you always want to talk to God first, and He will reveal to you in time, in little ways, in little moments, the direction that you're supposed to go in. But the only way you're going to hear that direction is if you're in communication with God, if you're in your Bible, if you're praying, if you're open to receiving the answer to what you're praying about. It's not one size fits all. For some, the answer is restoration. For some, the answer is not restoration.
It's redemption after divorce.
It's redemption after divorce. And ultimately, the way you determine that is by listen to God and then look for the fruit, because the fruit will be how you'll discern the direction you're supposed to go in. And we'll talk about the fruit in next week's episode, because I think that's going to help bring everything together. So I want to give a little bit of parallel and bring us back to the importance and the responsibility that comes from healing and the story of David. So more specifically, when David fought Goliath, the people had to get through the valley, but for 40 days they were stuck because everyone was avoiding fighting this giant. And this giant, insert whatever your situation is, that's your giant.
Okay.
When we're unable to make a decision, or when we can't commit to the decision that we've made.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And that's prolonging the path that God has for you. The thing that's blocking your future isn't trauma, it's the fear of what if, instead of trusting God. Some people try to go around it, some people try to avoid it, but sometimes you have to go through it. Like David did, to defeat the giant.
And more importantly, like that's the only way to go.
And remember, you're not going through it alone. God is with you. And what I find interesting in the story of David is Saul tried to give him this whole armor. And a little bit of backstory with David. David had fought lions. David had fought bears, I think, right? And he'd fought them with a slingshot. And here's Saul like, hey, you're going to go against this giant and here's an armor. But David's like, no, I'm going to pull from the things that I've grown through. And that's what he did. He pulled from the tools that God had given him specifically to defeat this giant. Not what others recommended, not what others had as their own tools. It's what he had.
I really love what you just said right there, because it has me thinking about how God gives us tools in the Bible, like the way to do things. And sometimes we can enter into situations where we feel like they're unfamiliar. So we're going to trust the advice of people that are supposedly in that area. But we don't realize the only reason we made it this far was with the tools that God gave us to get there. It wasn't those people that are there that made us reach that point. It is God. And sometimes I feel like we can end up in positions where we're just like, wow, this is a big step. I have to change what I'm used to doing. I have to change my game plan. I have to change the game plan that got me here in the first place and take advice from the pros. That could be really damaging. Like David, he taking advice from the pros in David's sense would be listening to Saul and taking on all that armor, where he's like, no, I actually got here through just God's instruction.
Exactly. It also makes me think like God brought you through everything that you've been through in the past. Like, trust that he's going to get you through this as well. He's going to vindicate you. And again, insert God's definition of vindicate in your situation. Like, it's not black and white. It's not one way or the other. So there is beauty in learning from the mistakes others have made so that you don't make the same mistakes. So I don't want to disqualify advice that comes from people who love you, who have experienced similar situations, or people who do have your best interest at heart. But I do think at the end of the day, it's a full picture. It's not just what the people around you are saying.
Use your discernment.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. At the end of the day, you have to use your discernment. And the only way your discernment will work is if it's founded in the wisdom that you receive from the time you spend with God.
Yes.
And that brings us to a few other verses that are a little intense, but I think when you take into account everything we just talked about, it's not calling your giant names, it's portraying a specific discernment.
I want to add that I actually love these verses that you're about to say, and they do sound extreme, but they're exactly like what I need to tell myself to stay in my lane.
The first one, Proverbs 26:11, and it says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. And to add, healing is going to make repetition more painful because now you know better. And what I want to add to that is, what is vomit? Vomit is you regurgitating something that your body is rejecting.
Ooh, something that your body is rejecting. You're right.
And so now that you know your body is rejecting it, you know better. Okay, so the other verse is Matthew 7:6. And it says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to the swine. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. To further explain that verse and put it into context, think of what it takes to make a pearl. So a pearl is created through harsh circumstances. It's created through irritation, through just bad conditions. And out of all of that, something beautiful comes out, a pearl. So now you have something sacred. And this verse is basically saying, don't take something sacred. There's beauty that comes from all of the healing that you just went through. And you've come this far. Don't go insisting on trying to prove your growth to those who are committed to misunderstanding you.
Yes. I really loved when you said that, because in my mind, I could understand people when they misunderstand you, but you said committed to misunderstanding you. And I can't picture someone being committed to something so wicked.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is understanding that no matter the direction you end up going with, the pain that you're feeling now doesn't compare to the glory that's to come. And that's in Romans 8:18. So don't let your feelings distort the truth. Stay grounded in God's word and use your discernment when you are making these decisions, because there is responsibility that comes with your decision in either direction.
And I think the great thing about doing this with God is that you're not carrying that responsibility alone.
Yeah.
It's a shared responsibility. It's one where you can say, hey, I screwed up. I need help. And he's like, I know. I saw where you screwed up. I saw where that happened, and I'm still here. I feel like there's such beauty and grace in having God walk you through very difficult seasons. Obviously, we don't want to walk through them at all. But when God is a part of that journey, it's a shared responsibility now. And I'm like, I'm okay with sharing that responsibility, because even if it's hard, even if I screw up, even if I'm not okay with it, God is still going to redeem everything.
And I think an important thing to add to that is your heart posture in either direction that you go in. But again, the importance of guarding your heart. You do know better this time. You do know red flags this time, your own or theirs, but you do know this time. And so now you're responsible for stewarding whatever direction you're going in, because you're doing it with God this time. So that responsibility is a big one. And I think when we think about God's love, there is so much hope that gives us faith for whatever the future is to bring. And that brings me to next week's episode. We've alluded to it a bit during this episode. In that episode, we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit and how God's version of love looks in real life. And we're not talking chemistry, we're not talking intensity, but love that produces peace, patience, self-control, safety. So I'm so looking forward to that episode. I love love. I love God's love. And so with that, thank you for joining us today. We hope today's message bless you guys. And again, this is Faith Talk with
Val
and Sony.
Val
and Sony.